Kearney. I'm going to be hosting this mini session. What I'll be doing is reminding you, keep your cell phones off, and please stay for the entire presentation so that you can see all three speakers. And that's about it. I'm going to be presenting each of the speakers. So the first one I'm going to present is Leahy, and he's going to be talking to us about the classroom.
Okay, so my name is Leahy. Thank you guys for being here. And I did my research on flipped classrooms. So to give you guys a little context about where I did my research, I was over at Cambridge Ridge and Latin High School, which is the public high school in Cambridge. I taught math there. I taught a bunch of different math classes, but I did my research within my BC calculus class. I flipped one chapter in that unit, in that course. For those of you who don't know what BC calculus is, it's essentially calculus 1 and calculus 2 that you would find at the college level. So it's sort of like the most advanced course you can take math-wise in high school. So these were highly motivated students. So what is a flipped class? Well, to talk about what a flipped class is, first I want to talk about what a traditional or a standard class is. And a standard class is what you guys are used to. It's where you go to class and the teacher stands in front of the class, as I'm standing right now, and lectures about some topic. And then the students maybe have some time in class to do some activities or some practice with their peers. But the majority of their math practice happens at home. And so a flipped class flips that on its head. Prior to coming to class, the students watch a video lecture, and they learn the material there. And then they come to class, and they do what was traditionally homework with their peers, in ideally a group setting. At least that's how I did it. And so what are the benefits of a flipped class? Well, I want you to consider a student who's maybe sitting in algebra class, and they're listening to some lecture on quadratic equations or quadratic functions, and maybe the lecture goes a little too fast for them. They didn't ask enough questions where they should have, and they didn't understand all the material. And then they go home and they're going to practice the math, at least they try to. But they didn't understand the material 100% in class. And so maybe they can do the first problem or two, but they have a hard time with the third problem. And then by the fifth, sixth problem, they throw their hands up because they don't know if they're doing it right, they don't know how to do it. They come to class the next day. Maybe there's some time for them to review the homework in class, but they still have a lot of confusions about the material, and now we're on to learning new stuff, and that student is falling behind. There's a problem there. So how does a flipped class alleviate that? Well, first of all, the student watching the video lecture at home can watch at their own pace. You can watch it at 2 times speed. I had some students do that. You can also, it's BC calculus. But I also had students who would rewatch the same video 3 or 4 times. Right? So they really get to learn the material at their own pace. It's not just one set pace for the entire class. So it sort of has that built-in differentiation that within the lecture process. They can watch it however fast they want to. And it's always there for them to revisit. And then when they come to class, they're going to do the homework that they traditionally would have done at home, but now they get the benefit of doing it in class. And so what are the benefits of doing homework in class? Well, if I don't know how to do a problem, I can turn to my partner, my peers, and my group, and I can say, how did you guys do this problem? How do you do it? They also have access to the teacher. And I'm also projecting answers to the problems. So they're getting immediate feedback on each of these problems, and we're going through the solutions. And so by doing the homework in class, this is the main benefit of a flipped classroom, you get to realize a lot of support structures that you wouldn't have had doing it traditionally at home. Okay. So that brings me to my research question. My research question was, how does a flipped classroom affect academic performance? And of course my hypothesis was that it would increase academic performance, and that would show up in better grades, and that would be due mostly to differentiated speed the students can learn the material, and the higher quality math practice that can occur with all those support structures. And I wasn't the first person to research flipped classrooms. There's some research that I looked at prior. There was a study in 2016 that found that flipped classrooms increase motivation and achievement relative to a standard class. There's also Mattis 2014, which found that accuracy and mental effort accuracy increase and mental effort decrease with flipped instruction. And finally, Clark 2014 found that the flipped model increased engagement, communication, and perceived quality of instruction, but academic performance remained unchanged. So I had some research to suggest that maybe it would increase performance. Some research suggests maybe not much would change. So before I go into what my findings were, I'm going to talk about how I flipped my class. I used Khan Academy, and with Khan Academy I could assign all the videos that I wanted to. They had a really high production value, and they had a team of educators working on the videos. And it's a totally free platform. I got all my students loaded onto the platform. I could also assign them some practice to do at home so they can start working with the material after they learn it. I could track everything. I could see who watched what videos, how long they spent on the platform. I could see which problems the class had trouble with, so that would tell me which problems we would review in class the next day. And so it was a great platform. If everyone's trying to learn something on their own, highly recommend Khan Academy. Again, it's free. They do English, history, science. And so here's a quick layout of the year. My mentor was responsible originally for 2 periods of BC Calculus, period 3 and period 4. These are 80-minute periods, by the way. So there's only 4 periods in a day. And my mentor had full responsibility for period 3 throughout the entire year. And I took over full responsibility for period 4 halfway through the year. So that black bar here is January 1st, where I resumed, or January 2nd rather, where I resumed full responsibility of the class and was in charge of lesson planning and all that. And you'll notice there was one flip chapter here, and that's chapter 7. And so I used the data from chapter 7 to draw some conclusions and compare to grades from the standard portion of the class and grades between period 3 and period 4. And so what did I find? Well, first of all, mean test scores increased by about, what, 4.8%. And so I saw this and I thought, okay, this is looking good so far. Maybe I'm onto something. Maybe the higher quality math and practice and the differentiated learning speed is effective. Maybe it's doing something there. I also looked at grades between period 3, which is the top bar, and period 4 on the bottom bar. Keep in mind, period 4 was the one that I flipped for a chapter. Okay. Prior to the flipped, or with the standard portion of the class, there was actually a pretty large performance gap between period 3 and period 4. Not exactly sure why this was, maybe just luck of the draw. Different classes had different students, maybe different time of day. But what I found was, by flipping chapter 7 for period 4, I was able to almost entirely eliminate the performance gap between period 4 and period 3. Okay, maybe this really is doing something. Finally, I also wanted to ask myself, is Khan Academy effective at doing this job? Is it working? And so, this is a linear regression. I ran a linear regression on time spent on Khan Academy, and I looked at time spent on Khan Academy and the change in the test score. And I found that there was, in fact, a positive relationship. That's not surprising. And so, the slope of this line is about 0.05, and that means that for every 100 minutes my students spent on Khan Academy, they increased their test score by about 5%. So the Khan Academy platform is actually working. It's doing a good job. It's providing high-quality instruction. Okay. I also asked my students to rank their overall experience using the flipped class.
Loved it.
Yeah, so I had one student hate it. No one loved it. The mean score here was a 3, so I'll call that a lukewarm response. I didn't make them aware of their relative performance increase. These are very grade conscious students. Had I made them aware of the performance increase, I think they would have ranked it higher. These students are all trying to get into Harvard. Yeah, so they thought it was okay. That's fine. I mean, I did, basically, chapter 7 was like near the middle of the year, and I didn't give them any warning. I just kind of walked in. I was like, hey, we're doing a flip chapter, and I kind of freaked out. So I think had I, done this at the beginning of the year, I would have gotten results here. Okay, so what did I learn? Well, I learned that with the flipped class model, I was able to create a more student-centered experience. And with the higher quality math practice that occurred in class, and with the differentiated learning state that students could engage in, I was able to increase performance, academic performance. And I had some future questions. So this was actually, I thought, a big success. I only flipped one chapter and it seemed to work really well. And so I actually plan on doing this in my future teaching next year. And I want to look at, in the future, maybe like how to differentiate in class time for my students. Thank you. And I think if we want to do questions at the very end.
Do you want to do,
So-
no, you can do questions, we got time.
Let's do questions at the end,
Okay,
just so we make sure we have enough time.
all right. Much like my real classes, there's
So we'll hold questions at the end, so remember your questions. So the next person who's going to go up is Norah Kearney. She's going to be presenting us her full class participation in her English classroom. Nora.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to my presentation. I'm very excited to share with you what I was doing at my work at Brown Middle School in Newton this past year. Just a little bit about the school. I was there for the entire year, either in the 8th grade classroom or 6th grade classroom. So for the purposes of this project, I am going to be focusing in on one of my 8th grade classrooms who they really struggled to participate. I would ask out a question and they didn't really want to talk back to me. So started to think about, how can I make this better? And this was especially close to my heart because as an 8th grader myself, I really felt like I understood where they came from. I was one of those students who really struggled with participating. So I'm going to bring you back to my 8th grade year. Brace yourselves. So when I was in 8th grade, I was a really good student, good at school, but I struggled with participation, like I said. And I decided, as the shy little nerd that I was like, I'm gonna do better. So I tried to train myself on my own. I did develop participation skills and abilities. I still kind of struggle with it a little bit, even in college. I still use those same skills that I have built during this time, and I continue to benefit to this day. So I was like, I know these students, this is the project I want to do, and I'm going to do a great job, making things better for them. So I did some research, I read some teacher blogs, I talked to some people, and I came up with these initial ideas. Wait time, you just kind of wait. See what they say. If they don't say anything, you kind of wait some more. I might ask a question. If no one said anything, I might say, I'm going to wait till there's 7 hands in the air. And then you wait. And then, slowly 7 hands will go in the air, then you call on somebody. Or I would try the classic think, pair, share. So I would have them think, pair them up, and then I would just call on someone randomly, cold call. So I felt like, this is going to work. This is going to be good. The problem is it didn't really work that well. It kind of had them just participating in a short-term way, they weren't really developing the intrinsic motivation or skills to do it on their own. So I have this little comic to illustrate how it was in my classroom all the time. So one day I decided this is just not going to work, and I just stopped in the middle of class and I gave my first survey that ended up being the beginning of my data collection for this project. So I just asked them a few questions. One of them was, how would you grade yourself in full class participation? You'll notice that, some kids felt like they were doing pretty well. There's always the students who do raise their hands pretty regularly and they don't struggle with it very much. We had, a lot in the C range though, over 50%. And I also had some open response areas where I asked them, what is the struggle for you? And I also asked them how they thought I could help them do better. I noticed that students they tended to feel uncomfortable in the classroom participating, which makes sense. But I also got some pretty good feedback, specifically this one in the middle. We tend to discuss in small groups and then move to share what we discussed. And I think that's boring since we just did it. So the two categories of things I decided to focus on became the lesson plan. Participating needed to be part of the lesson plan, teaching those skills, and so I need to be more intentional with the way that I was creating lessons. And then the other piece was just going to be to create a really comfortable environment, and one way that I did that was being totally transparent with my students. And I said, you know guys, like as a group, this is something we tend to struggle with, and I get it, like I've been there, I was you guys once, and we're going to work on this together as a class. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of ways, in very small and then bigger ways, that I did scaffold participation into my classroom. This is one low-stakes example from my To Kill a Mockingbird unit, where students had to all create some little vocabulary drawing to show that they understood what the word meant, and they had to give a little mini presentation just from their desk, sharing out to the class. There's a transcription on the side because the audio isn't always that great with these, so I'm just going to show you a few seconds so you can get an idea. From chapter 3, on into this one. Okay, so it's super detailed. Do you want to explain it on?
Oh, cool, yeah. So irk means annoy, and that's usually after school, like,
Okay. So as you can see, it's kind of fun, it's kind of goofy. Some kids got super into showing off their art skills, but a lot of them just did cute little stick figures. They didn't get counted off for that. So this was an example of a time where every single student got to have their voice shared out into the classroom. Now this is a little bit disconnected. So the bigger piece of my research fell into this larger unit on the book called The 57 Bus. I decided to put the bulk of my planning into this unit particularly. We had different things like an online discussion board, small group activities where students were able to share out different results that they had or conclusions they had come up with during the online discussion board, and we would relate that. We had station activities, they had a full class debate. There was also a silent discussion activity, which I'll talk about a little more, and then for their final project, they had to give a small presentation of a little project they did during the unit. And it was during this time that I really started to see writing as a discussion scaffold. You need to prepare. You need to show that you also have ideas, and before you're going to maybe feel comfortable actually speaking those out loud. So this is an example of a silent discussion that I created. So students would be in their little, in their groups at their tables, and they had a question prompt on a piece of big poster paper, and then silently they just had to answer the questions and respond to one another before switching tables and adding to other things that people had said. And then after that, they would, with their voices to the fuller class, share out different ideas that had come up in that. So I was hoping, you feel comfy writing things on a piece of paper, and also you could share out someone else's ideas that you'd seen on the poster. This is a particularly interesting example to me of the online discussion that we did, because these two students were particularly quiet. This student was answering a question about the 57 bus, and she wrote a lot of very detailed thoughts. And this student, who I'm going to say in real life would probably never outright disagree with somebody, she says, "I just disagree with your first idea about teenagers knowing their decisions can be good or bad, etc." So she showed I am here and I can disagree and explain why I disagree. And so I was hoping that this would scaffold both these students' ability to speak more comfortably in the classroom. I'm showing the results of I did have a middle survey that went on, but it was kind of just, I felt like it was still in the middle of my research and nothing super interesting came up, so I wanted to show you the end survey. So as you can see, the C range has gone down from, I think it was 52% to 23%, and we have a larger category of students in the A and B range. And there's also the open response piece, and it wasn't dramatically amazing, but and students were very honest, and I really appreciated that. Some of them felt better. They realized we were practicing. I told them we were practicing, so they understood that. This one was, important. I did talk more because it was basically required to participate. I didn't feel like I actually improved. So that was a good note for me. I need to continue to make this more of an intrinsic motivation. And there was one nice student who said really nice things about how it was super successful for her, so had to include that as well. So the results in general that I saw were that, I saw my students grow in general in engagement, personality, and risk-taking in class. Some of the little low-stakes activities really help show, these students can be funny, they can be goofy, they can talk to one another, and that's always important in the classroom community. And also, I did hear from every student more often, and even if it felt uncomfortable or they didn't like it or they didn't personally feel that they were more confident speaking out, I know that every single one of them was able to practice the skills. And so I'm hoping that in their full education time that they will have an opportunity to feel more comfortable eventually in that. And my reflections after research is that even though it's very difficult sometimes to actually do research while you're teaching, it's definitely something that's valuable, and it's valuable to reflect and to think about what your practice is and to just try new things and not be afraid or nervous to do that. And my future consideration for the future research that I hope to do is definitely starting earlier in the year. And also just specifically zooming in on how student-centered thinking impacts participation, because I did notice that something I would struggle with sometimes was just planning lessons in the right way that would have students doing the bulk of the intellectual work. That was something that I am continuing to work on, because it can be a struggle to not just stand up at the front of the classroom and have them go through in that traditional way that a lot of us were taught in. So I think that that's a big piece as well that I worked on throughout the year, but I want to continue working on as I move forward. Thank you very much.
All right, if we're going with our tradition of holding questions to the end, I'm going to be the last speaker. I'm Sheila Crean, and we are going